It's on now. I've got you.
Okay.
Okay. Whoops, I hit the button again.
Yeah.
All continuous.
Are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
Don't get the. It's not
Okay,
hot yet.
we're ready.
Just hit-
We're ready.
I have always found it a source of pride that the Ringlings were my great-great-uncles. My great-grandmother was a Ringling, and stories about how they started their circus in the backyard have traveled down through the generations of my family. I began this speech assuming that I would find the most interesting stories would relate to John and Charles and their work with the circus. What I came to learn was that they each had fascinating lives outside of the circus life, and I became most proud of their legacy of generosity. I'd like to tell you about the members of the Ringling family and how they contributed to the start of the Ringling Brothers Circus, but I'd also like to tell you specifically about the lives of Charles and John Ringling, the two brothers who lived the longest and held control of the circus until John passed away in 1936. Let's start in 1884, when the eldest Ringling son, Albert, was 32 years old. The Ringlings came from Germany to the Midwest and raised a large family. August and Marie Rungling, later adapted to Ringling, had 7 sons and 1 daughter. Albert, Otto, Alfred, John, Gus, Henry, Charles, and Ida were born in Wisconsin and Iowa and were all creative and savvy, although none were educated farther than grammar school. The circus started as a small backyard endeavor when Albert, the oldest, was 34. At the start in 1884, only 5 of the brothers were involved in the business. But by 1887, all 7 of the brothers worked together. At one point, the show was officially known as the Ringling Brothers United Monster Show, Great Double Circus, Royal European Menagerie, Museum Caravan, and Congress of Trained Animals. That was a mouthful. Each of the 7 brothers had their own responsibilities within the show. Albert found the acts in the beginning. Otto was the money manager. Alfred handled publicity. Charles started as producer, eventually taking over advertising and personnel also, and always traveled with the circus. John supervised transportation initially. He also gained the responsibility of finding the acts in Europe after Albert passed away. Gus was in charge of advertising after Albert passed away. And Henry attended each performance to watch from the spectator's viewpoint. The brothers purchased Barnum and Bailey in 1907, and then the American Circus Corporation in 1929. All of the other brothers died young, leaving Charles and John to run the circus. One of the biggest decisions that they made was to move the winter headquarters from Connecticut to Sarasota. This greatly helped to boost Sarasota's economy and population, which had been dwindling up until that point. Wintering in Sarasota allowed the Ringlings to share the behind-the-scenes aspect of the circus with all who wanted to enjoy it, with a 25-cent admission charge. By mandate of John Ringling, 100% of the money that they earned in this way was always put towards charity in the Sarasota community. Now I'd like to tell you specifically about Charles's life with the circus and outside of it during his lifetime from 1863 to 1926. Charles was known to all who worked with him as being the most approachable of all of the brothers. At only 6 feet tall, he was considered small compared to his family. He was friendly and witty. He was married to Edith. They were very happy, and they had 2 children, Hester and Robert. Charles was always very musical and often played with the band during the circus pre-show act. He especially loved circus animals. As written in the book by my cousin, Pat Ringling Buck, The Ringling Legacy, Charles's obituary in the New York Times included this quote: "If I'm ever inclined to wonder whether I'm the sort of man I'd like to be, I go out to the menagerie, for unless my animals like me, I'm a failure." He definitely made a point of operating a clean circus with no gambling, no excessive drinking, and no illegal activities anywhere around the business. Like all of the Ringlings, he loved the outdoors, along with his wife, who herself was an avid hunter, fisher, and sailor. Charles Ringling was also the founder and president of the Ringling Trust and Savings Bank, founder and president of Charles Ringling Company, which was a real estate development company in Sarasota, and served as the Sarasota president of Chamber of Commerce. Just one example of his generosity was displayed when he donated the land to the city for the courthouse to be built on. His legacy endured throughout his family. During the Great Depression, when his bank folded, his widow, Edith Ringling, paid back every single penny that depositors had lost out of her own personal funds, totaling $250,000. John's life was lived more in the spotlight, despite his personality being much more reserved than his brother Charles. Tall, at a height of 6'4", John was an imposing man. Always well-dressed, but soft-spoken, John had many associates, but not many close friends. He was very happily married to the love of his life, Mabel, and they didn't have any children. Like all of the Ringlings, they also loved the outdoors and camping, and Mabel hunted, fished, and gardened. John became interested in art while spending time in Europe regularly auditioning new acts, and began to dream and plan of owning his own museum. He was also a major real estate developer in Sarasota, including taking responsibility and funding building the bridge that linked the mainland to the barrier islands. Like his brother Charles, John served as president of the Chamber of Commerce and owned his own bank, the Bank of Sarasota. John and Mabel planned, built, and made home Kadzan, which means House of John in Venetian, but also means House of Zany, as in clown, which John thought was very amusing. Construction of this amazing house began in 1924, and it remains one of the most popular tourist attractions in Sarasota to this day. In this home, John and Mabel entertained their circle of friends regularly, including governors and mayors, the vice president of the New York Railroad, the owner of the New York Giants, the actor Will Rogers, and Thomas Edison himself. John had developed a remarkable eye over the past decade and spent nearly all of that time collecting amazing pieces of art to build his own museum on the grounds of Kadzan, which opened in 1931 and is open to this day, still known as the Ringling Museum of Art. He built the museum because, according to the March 21st, 2014 article by New York-based curator and art critic Karen Wilkin in the online Wall Street Journal article titled Ringling Museum, a Big Tent that celebrates the classics, Ringling wanted to introduce Americans to the art and architecture that he himself had fallen in love with during his travels in Europe. In addition, the Ringling School of Art, a private college that in 2007 was renamed the Ringling College of Art and Design, was also founded in 1931, although it was not financed by John, who by then was bordering bankruptcy. As one of his last acts of kindness and generosity, John left his entire art collection, the museum, the House Kadzan, and all of his land to the state of Florida. Now you understand why the Ringling struck me as particularly generous, in addition to being creative and amazing businessmen and entertainers. In conclusion, I hope that you can now see that the Ringlings were more than just a circus family. They were a multi-talented, close-knit group of smart, kind, and giving men who strove to bring happiness to people across the country, as well as enriching the lives of anyone who could benefit from their endeavors in Florida. While much of this information was gathered by stories told in my family throughout the past century, a lot of the details were organized specifically by my distant cousin, Pat Ringling Buck, in memoirs and books that she had published, such as The Ringling Legacy, a booklet that she gifted to my fraternal grandparents and that now belongs to my father. I am proud to be a descendant, not just because they were the Ringling brothers, but just as much because of the legacy of hard work and kind-heartedness that they left. Okay. Take one. Let's do it one more time.
That was good.